So welcome everyone. My name is Wendy Birch. I am the executive director for NAMI New York State, and I'm so glad you're able to join us for our final Wellness Wednesday, which is on rethinking wellness, thriving versus surviving. Before we start, again, I wanted to remind everyone to please mute if you're not a presenter, and if you have questions, you can certainly share them in the chat as we go along, and we'll have time for questions at the end. As I said, this is our fourth Wellness Wednesday. We have recorded all of them, so the others are available for viewing, as well as our Tuesday talks that we've been doing too around women's mental health. Before we start, I would like to ask everyone to just give a moment of silence for the tragedies that happened both in Texas yesterday and also in Buffalo last week. So if we could just give it a minute. Thank you. And I know that with things that have been happening, it can be very traumatic and triggering for people. So I just want to remind everyone that, we do here in New York have Project Hope, which is a line that you can reach out to kind of talk about what's going on with you and as an emotional support. And of course, there's also the NAMI helpline as well. We can help connect you with resources. So I will make sure I add those into the chat for anybody who would like to access them. But at this point, I am going to turn it over to Jacqueline, who is a member of NAMI New York State's Wellness Committee. She's a wellness expert, primarily or specifically in the areas of diet and fitness, but certainly other areas too. And I do want to acknowledge our Wellness Committee for putting this together. So thank you. Jacqueline?
Thank you for the introduction, Wendy. So yeah, like Wendy kind of said, this conversation is focused on really migrating from surviving to thriving, and we hope for this to aim to assist you in setting intentional goals that fit into your own personal wellness journey. So I'm going to start off by introducing our first two speakers, Roger Perkley III and Rachel Mangold. Roger provides oversight to the student wellness ambassadors. Specifically, he strives to integrate the 9 dimensions of wellness into the educational initiatives of the presentation cohort of the student wellness ambassadors. In addition to presentation responsibilities, he aims to enhance wellness across the student body through trainings, workshops, and programming. In his work, he aims to practice with a holistic view on wellness and actively maintain equitable practices, especially as it relates to uplifting historically disenfranchised voices. And transitioning into Rachel Mangold, Rachel oversees the Wellness Coaching Service and supports the Student Life Student Wellness Center's team by facilitating trainings, coordinating coaching initiatives, and by coaching students herself. Rachel is committed to supporting students' wellness goals and fostering a culture of inclusivity, growth, and compassion. Having been a student at The Ohio State University in the past and a past volunteer with the Student Wellness Center, Rachel has a first-hand account of the impact that can be made from the services offered within the Office of Student Life. So thank you, Rachel and Roger, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Well, honestly, thank you so much for the warm introduction. This is really an excellent opportunity for both of us to be able to speak in front of all of you today. If you give me just one moment, I'll go ahead and get our presentation pulled up as we kind of dive into what this content is going to be today. And as Jacqueline has already introduced, we're trying to move from this idea of simply surviving to thriving. But we're going to be splitting this presentation kind of right down the middle. So you'll get to hear from me for the first half, and I'll pass it over to Rachel about halfway through. But I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to really be on the same page for what we are discussing. Why are we here? Why are we the ones who are going to be leading this conversation? And what are we going to be discussing today? So as already introduced in our bios, we serve as wellness coordinators here at Ohio State University. We actually decided that we wanted to take a moment and give you a little bit of a sneak peek behind the curtain, if you will, as to how we do our work and how we approach this in our day-to-day operations. So the first first portion of our conversation today is actually going to be a little bit of the machinations of what we do day in and day out to enhance and increase holistic wellness amongst the student population. And then towards the end, we're going to kind of pivot this with Rachel focusing a little bit more so on how you can build this into your specific lives. And as long as we have plenty of time at the end, we'll be making sure that we can end with some goal and some action-oriented setting. So let's talk a little bit about what we do and what are the resources that we offer at our institution, knowing that this is not going to necessarily directly apply to all of you, but it relates to how we do our work. I am certainly not going to be going over this extensive list that you can see on the screen currently, but I do want to give you an opportunity to look through the ways that we address wellness across a spectrum. The reason we are starting with this slide is we do not believe that wellness, holistic wellness, health, and wellness exist in a silo. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach for ensuring that we are adhering to the needs of any specific population, person, or individual. So we meet our students where they are at. We make sure that we have services and experts that are able to directly affect the necessary change given any type of situation. And on a given year, we rotate these services and we kind of build up and maybe rebuild some of the ones that aren't getting as much love, care, and attention as some of the others are. Now, if this were a presentation for some of my colleagues here in the Ohio area, specifically having a conversation maybe around students here on our campus, we make sure that everyone knows exactly how to access all of these services, where they are located, and if there is a fee associated with them. And we do that for a couple of reasons, because we need to acknowledge that there are some inherent barriers, whether they are physical barriers, or maybe they're more emotional or spiritual, cultural barriers for individuals being able to work on their individual independent wellness. And to make sure that we are limiting as many of these barriers as possible, we want to make sure that those individuals who are seeking our services can do so at no charge. Everything that we offer is completely free and private. Now, we make sure there's a big difference here, acknowledging the idea of what is private whenever we're working with a student population and how this can be translated into the work some of you may be doing with your groups as well. We acknowledge that you'll see the third major bullet point down here. Within the Student Wellness Center, yes, we offer holistic wellness services. Yes, we are a private provider, but we are not healthcare practitioners. We cannot offer confidential services. So we acknowledge that we need to be making sure that we have this tripod of power, this tripod of leadership shared across our actual student health services with counseling and consultation services, our counseling group on campus, because we can't do any of this work alone. Just as whenever you are trying to build up your own independent, personal, holistic wellness, it can be challenging to have maybe setting agendas, going to the gym, all on your own. It is necessary to have that accountability, not just from staff and colleagues, but also partners and mentors in your personal life to make sure that you're moving the direction you want to be moving whenever we are focusing on our individual health and wellness. Now, centered at all of the work that we do and hopefully maybe setting some expectations for how we can redefine holistic well-being in your lives, we want to offer a definition that we use here at Ohio State. For us, well-being is an active and ongoing process that allows individuals as well as the broader community to reach their full potential. Now, let's unpack this just a little bit. We want to acknowledge and understand that this is something that needs to be actively worked on. This is not necessarily the type of process that you can set it and forget it. This is something that needs a little bit of love and care, right? Whenever we are building plans, we need to be able to come back to them, maintain them, see what is working, what is not working, and adjust as necessary. We also have to acknowledge that this is an ongoing process. The wellness journey of someone between the ages of 18 to 24 and the ages of 45 to 62 look a little bit different. And we have to understand that the needs of these individuals need to be tailored. They need to be adjusted. We recognize this. We also have to separate the idea of what does an individual need to be well as compared to what does a community need to be well. When we talk about this, we need to talk about the more specific inter and intrapersonal needs of the individual, but we also have to make sure that we're addressing some of the more societal, community level needs when we're talking about wellness, right? Talk a little bit about access and barriers when we kind of unpack the ideas of the social determinants of health.
Did you overcook it?
Now, to make this make a little bit more sense, and really honing in on the idea of what is prevention? How can we get ahead of some of these concerns? And how can we maybe put this on a simple little graphic to help us understand not only the work that we are doing, but possibly the work that you're doing for yourselves or for others that you work with? Let's use this illness to wellness continuum. I want to draw your attention first and foremost to this 4, 5, 6 comfort zone, right there in the neutral area. Now, you can read just as well and see that for most individuals sitting in this neutral area, we're sitting at maybe no physical symptoms, no emotional symptoms. Maybe you're not going to the gym quite as much as you would like to. It's a little bit sporadic. Maybe you eat out a little bit more than you would like. Some people would say it is less than healthy. It really just depends. All foods fit. That's a whole different conversation, but your nutrition is a little bit more inconsistent. Generally speaking, your health's not really a high priority. What we kind of call this center neutral area, this 4, 5, 6 zone, this idea of false wellness. The lack of some type of symptom, the lack of a disease state does not inherently mean that an individual is leading a holistically well or empowered life. The lack of symptom does not necessarily mean that an individual is experiencing good health, which in our work specifically dealing with college-age individuals and some young adults, well, we see a lot of individuals kind of falling into this. Well, I feel fine. I don't need to worry about this too much, correct? Holistic wellness requires an active and ongoing process. So our work and what we're going to hope to impart to all of you later in today's conversation is the idea of building in those practices, setting the goals, moving forward to get the appropriate diet, exercise, and what is oftentimes left off of this conversation, the drive to seek additional information and education, reducing the barriers to the things that you are less than confident in, less than familiar with, to be able to make sure that we are pushing forward. Now, obviously, this looks a little bit more so like physical maladies. This reads very clinical to an individual. And for those of you who are in the clinical sciences, wonderful, this makes a lot of sense to you. For those of you who maybe are a little bit more on the psychological sciences, other side of this, well, how does this kind of come into play? What we use is the idea of the 9, soon to be 10 dimensions of wellness model. Now on this screen, and I certainly won't go through an activity or an exercise asking you all to try to name what they are, but as I flash these up on the screen, I want to kind of plant a seed here. As you're looking at the 9 dimensions that we currently have on the screen, I want you to understand that we as individuals are complex, multifaceted individuals. When we are talking about mental health specifically, we are not just talking about the idea of our emotional, social well-being. We have to acknowledge that how we are doing and feeling in our career directly comes into play for our emotional, social, mental health. How we are doing financially, how we are doing physically, our spiritual component all comes into play. To make a long story short, we need to be able to understand that everything is connected. When we talk about holistic wellness, we need to be able to see the tendrils, the spider webs that are drawing all of these things together. Whenever there is a deficit in one, it can come into play and begin to affect other aspects of our lives. So, as we begin to make plans, set objectives, we try to see what are the short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals to bring wellness practices into our lives. We cannot simply focus on one aspect. We need to go back to this idea of this multifaceted approach. Do we feel intellectually stimulated in our career? Do we feel valued, validated in the work that we are doing? Do we have an opportunity to flex that creative muscle? If your answer is no to some of these, making sure that we're giving some love and care into some of these other areas as well. It's remarkably important and remarkably impactful and kind of bring up our own personal wellness. Now, I'm a data person. I think this is really important. And I really wanted to drive one final point home, pulling on some information from one of our more recent data points here at OSU. We were able to survey a small group of our students. We have over 60,000 on our campus, so I would have liked to see a few more on here. But over the course of this, you would notice that our emotional wellness score was the lowest of all of our categories. Now, given some things that have been going on in recent years, society as a whole, yes, this can possibly track. We also have a target population of college individuals, which means that there could be a little bit of bias here as well with individuals who are inherently maybe a little bit more stressed, than some other counterparts or other parts in their lives. But what's really interesting as we take a look at this is of the individuals who are kind of reporting that they're feeling symptoms of being overwhelmed, feeling anxious, lonely, hopelessness, or actual active depression status, you can see that we have reports from individuals from the past 2 weeks, as well as reports of individuals from the past 12 months. Of those who are reporting symptoms, only 18% of individuals are reporting that they're actually seeking some type of conversation with a staff member, with a professional. Now, again, you may be asking yourself, now this is really specific information to one population at OSU talking about college-age target groups. These are some remarkably formative years for individuals. The practices that they build into their lives during these years oftentimes are carried well into adulthood. The reason we start with this conversation to share is in order to make sure that we are working to enhance future wellness of the next generations, the next populations, this is where this work really needs to be done. And acknowledging when there were missteps, bad habits, or other things that were learned in the younger years, acknowledging that we need to work backwards a little bit and say that, okay, there's some things that have maybe been taught, learned experiences, and we need to be able to move forward past this and maybe teach some better habits, some better tips, some better tricks. So let's start somewhere as we kind of move into this conversation before I pass it off to Rachel to really drive us home on what the core content is going to be today. Just sharing and reading aloud, just so we can all hear it one more time. We can't control if stressful events happen to us, but we can control how we respond to them. The central tenet to this is understanding the idea of what is resiliency? What does resiliency mean to you? And what does resiliency mean kind of in this conversation today? As we enter a space and discuss resiliency, I want to acknowledge 3 basic things. For us, we want to say that resiliency is a universal capacity, right? This is something that all people possess, but we have to acknowledge that we are kind of starting at different parts of the race. Different people possess different levels of the resilience ability, the resilience skill. But luckily for everyone here in this conversation, this is something that can be worked on, practiced, trained, just like any other muscle. Higher levels of resilience are a result of nurturing our inherent capacity, which again is universal, and making sure that we are kind of giving that love and care, giving it the attention that it needs, and finding what works for us to be able to build this up. If this is not something that we're actively giving time to, it's not necessarily going to be something that we're going to be reaping the benefits from. So as we pass this over, let's build up a toolkit. Let's talk about the actual steps that we can take to ensure that this is something that we can work on, something we can build. We can go from surviving to thriving. And with that, I'll mute myself and I'll pass it over to you, Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks, Roger. So yeah, we're going to start off talking about a toolkit, right? Things that you can utilize when you are feeling stressed, when you do want to work on some of these facets of your wellness. So we're going to go over 3 different techniques. We're going to talk about finding your flow. We're going to talk about mindfulness, and then we're going to talk about cultivating gratitude. I want to note that we are all different. You may listen to one of these and be like, that is the dumbest thing. There's no way that'll work in my life. Totally cool. Not going to hurt my feelings. Because we're all different. We all handle stress different ways. I also want to note that sometimes one tool may work better at some point in your life or for a specific stressor, while another tool works for a different kind of stressor. So there's not necessarily a one size fits all. It's not like you just have to focus on one of these tools. You can implement all of them into your life based on how you see fit and how they improve your wellness overall. So starting off with finding your flow, this is a very fun topic for myself, as I'll get into here in a little bit. So how do we define flow? So flow is being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. The ego falls away, time flies, every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved and you're using your skills to the utmost. I particularly love this definition for flow because of my heavy devotion to the movie Soul. And I'm not sure if any of you have seen that movie. It's one of my favorite animated films. But they depict this sense of flow in a way that when someone is engaging with something they love, something they're passionate about, they kind of enter in this in-between state, right? Where they're not whole on Earth, they're not in another universe, but they're in a whole another area, kind of in between these two. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. But I want to ask you all, and feel free to drop it in the chat, raise your hand, but what stands out to you within this definition? Coffee is definitely in my toolkit as well. Yes, I see a hand up. I think one, maybe two. Being involved in activity for its own sake, no one else's. All right, Miss Ndelalu, if you'd like to unmute yourself. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but please join us in this conversation. What stands out to you?
Yeah, I don't know where I can begin, anyway, I am like long time mental illness patient, but right now I understand myself. I came from far, and I am, we came from different background, different culture, and my mental illness was from rational thought. And I, like my family, how I was raised, and when I see the, on the, there is nothing on the fact on the ground, become different from my thought, I have only my children right here. I was a student. I was a mother, a wife, and I was a teacher back home. Every single thing, every single day, I'm very emotional when I see someone who gets hurt. I feel like they're like, it is what is, their pain. Like if it happened to me, just I was like that. But my life is very challenging, and but I'm grateful. My father, what he taught me, how can I live my life? At that time, I didn't understand, but when I start my own life, I understand everything. Anyway, I am faithful, and always I hope this thing will pass tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow is another day, and a good day will come. But it is very hard. My mental illness come like I didn't expect when September 11 happened here in American soil, and I was shocked. And my, that is the first, what can I say? The first one that strike my my heart was broken, and just I didn't expect, just the plane can, bring that kind of killing innocent people. I had never think, and I know also back home, I think my family, I will not see them anymore if this thing continue like this. And it was like between like taking it and not taking. It is that is, I know it, but when I become hospitalized, people, they don't understand what I mean, what I'm talking about. I never want to hurt anyone, even if I have that mentally. I had upset, and I have anger, but I don't know, what can I say? As a mother, I can't imagine again, this problem happened yesterday. I didn't see that. I was writing my feelings on, just like computer. I like to write sometimes, that can release my emotion. Because also, after my mentally after my mental problem, also I get, just my physically, I become I am become disabled. I have a very painful leg, just in the knee right now. I can't go out. I can't share, what I'm feeling. And I'm the victim of this kind of problem. But I never have, just when I teach back home, I had never discriminate the children I taught, like because they are different from my own religion, and or the culture is a little bit different.
Yeah.
You raised some really great points, but would you mind if we kept on with the presentation?
Presentation, how?
I'm just saying, I think we should continue and maybe bring up some of this at the end.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing, though. I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that with all of us. You did touch on some great topics. You actually touched on something we're going to talk about here in a second, about writing down your feelings and embracing those. So thank you for sharing that experience. So getting into kind of the basics of flow, right? This is when we're sensing that high level concentration. It's the perfect balance between the skills that we have and necessary challenge. So it's not too challenging where we feel defeated. We have that skill set ready for us, but it's also not too easy that we get bored and disengaged. All right, next we're going to get into some mindful coping tips. So this is going to be that second piece of your toolkit here. So one thing that I really want to speak on today is using nature as therapy. So biophilia is the instinctive bond between humans and nature. It's a real thing. And there is a mycobacterium, the K, which produces essentially endorphins, right? So that's supplying our body with serotonin. It's kind of like when you go exercise and you get those endorphins and you feel really good afterwards, feel lifted spirits. It's that same idea, but using nature as that modality. There is also something called nature deficit disorder, which is not clinically defined within the DSM-5. However, it's this idea that we're so withdrawn from nature, from being outside, that then it presents in some symptoms such as depression, anxiety, social withdrawal. So some tips on this: go for a walk, put your phone on airplane mode, use all your senses, sit in your backyard. I know one of my favorite things to do is just put my bare feet in the grass. So if I know I'm going outside and it's a nice day, I will make sure I'm not wearing shoes or socks, just so I can connect with nature, feel the grass, feel the dirt on my feet. For me, it's really peaceful. So that is the way that I like to utilize nature as my therapy. But just using 5 minutes to be outside can improve your mood. Another thing is crafting a sleep routine. I'm sure it is not surprising that many people struggle with consistent sleep, with quality and quantity of sleep. And we're all very much aware, likely, that our phones and our screens do not help this. So there's actually some research that shows that using a screen within 4 hours of sleep can affect our sleep cycle. Now, that is not realistic to not utilize the screen within 4 hours of going to bed, but it is recommended 1 to 2 hours before you go to sleep to put the screens away, put your phone on do not disturb, turn off the TV, and really allow yourself to calm down and relax. Along with this, I know someone mentioned caffeine and coffee as their coping mechanism. It's recommended that you do not consume caffeine after 3 p.m. as the effects of caffeine obviously are to keep us awake, and this can impact our sleep schedule. All right, and this is kind of the activity that you brought up with us, sitting with your feelings. So obviously we know the world can be a really hard place to be in, and we're constantly bombarded with things going on that impact us, impact our loved ones, our communities, and it's a lot to digest. And sometimes, it's okay to put the feelings to the side for a moment until you have the time to process those. There's nothing wrong with that. However, it is important to, at some point, address those feelings and really try to engage with them and identify them. So there is a name the feeling technique where essentially trying to just identify what your emotion is. And I'm going to challenge you guys to make sure you're not mixing up a feeling with a thought. So sometimes I'll say, I feel like I could have done better at this. It's not technically a feeling, right? That's a thought. But the feeling behind that would be, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling overworked, fill in the blanks there. So making sure that you're having that clear difference between a feeling and a thought. There are some mood tracker apps, meditation, which we're going to actually do a quick activity here in a minute. Painting, I personally love utilizing creativity and art to help myself identify and engage with my emotions, especially if they're particularly strong and overwhelming. Balancing your media intake. So it is important to stay in the know, right? It's important to know what's going on around us, as, like I said, it can impact ourselves and our loved ones. However, we're constantly bombarded with news, a lot of it being negative, and that is really hard to sit with and continually experience. So some tips here on how to navigate this balance. Planning time to catch up on the news each day. So likely if you're utilizing various social medias, you're going to get news on a lot of different outlets, and you're continually consuming things as they come in. It's recommended you can just set aside some time to read through your favorite news sources and absorb the material in one setting rather than a span across the whole day where you never really get that break and that disconnect. Add limits to your screen time, and keep home screen for tools only. All right, so getting into meditation, and we actually did a meditation practice in our staff meeting just a couple hours ago. So meditation is paying attention in a particular way. It's on purpose, it's intentional, being present in the moment, excuse me. So a lot of times people think that meditation is about clearing your whole mind, letting everything go, just having a blank slate mind. That's not technically it. So really, meditation is about being intentional in our thoughts, right? Focusing on something specific, whether that's our emotions, our feelings, letting thoughts come into our mind and then go away like clouds passing through the sky. Some benefits of meditation: it can reduce anxiety and stress. And this meditation has both a physical and a mental impact. So meditation can lower our blood pressure, lower our breathing and our heart rate, getting us back into that parasympathetic state where we're more relaxed and calm. It can help us focus better and reduce some of that stress. All right, so we are going to do a meditation practice. It does start off a little quiet, but let us know in the chat if you are unable to hear this.
Now find a seated position in a chair or on the floor. Allow your hands to fall naturally in your lap. And gently close your eyes. Notice how your body feels right now. Noticing any areas of tension. Scan your body from the top of your head down to your toes. Loosen your grip on your eyes so they're barely closed. Unwrinkle your forehead. Relax your jaw, allowing your lips to part slightly. And relax any other body parts that are tense right now. Now tune in to your breathing. The breath will be our anchor, bringing us back to the present moment. The breath is never in the past or the future. It's always happening right now. To help you focus on your breath, you can pay attention to the rising and falling of your stomach. Or the coolness in your nostrils when you breathe in. Or the heat when you breathe out. Whatever helps you focus on your breath, do that. Now you may notice that your mind starts to wander from time to time. That's perfectly okay and natural. Just notice when you get distracted. Simply noticing the thoughts without judging them, without thinking that they are good or bad. Simply noticing them. You can say to yourself, thinking or wandering, and then gently direct your attention back to the breath. So we'll do this for a few minutes in silence. Simply paying attention to your breathing, noticing wandering thoughts without judging them, and then gently directing your attention back to the breath. Now, before we wrap up, we're going to send some loving kindness to ourselves and others. Place your left hand on your heart and your right hand on top of your left. And think of someone you care for deeply. Repeating the following to yourself, sending these intentions to your loved one. May you be well, healthy, strong. May you be happy. May you feel safe and secure. May you feel loved and cared for. Now we will send those same intentions to ourselves. May I be well, healthy, strong. May I be happy. May I feel safe and secure. May I feel loved and cared for. May I accept myself just as I am. My personality, my intellect, my physical characteristics. May I accept it all just as it is.
Alrighty, so drop in the chat some of your thoughts. How did that feel? And in all honesty, the first few times I meditated, I felt really weird, really awkward, kind of silly. And that's okay. And all of these things in our toolkit that we're going to talk about today, that we have talked about already, it's a new habit. It's a new practice to pick up. So if at first it feels intimidating, if it feels odd and uncomfortable, sit in that uncomfortability for a little bit, and allow yourself some grace to slowly work into these things. All right, so practicing meditation, if this is something that you feel like you want to integrate into your life, like I said, start small, right? Start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. And the best time to do this is when you're most likely to do it. So some people prefer in the morning, some people prefer in the evening, some people prefer in the middle of the afternoon as a nice little break, whatever works for you. Finding a space that's private and quiet is going to allow you to really engage with yourself, with those thoughts that pass by, with your breath. And like I said, it's going to feel unnatural at first, but try to keep it up for 2 weeks and see how you feel. So we've shared some guided meditations here. There's a few apps that you can utilize. The one that we used this afternoon in our staff meeting was called Tapping Solution, and I found it very interesting. It involved meditation with tapping certain points on your body. YouTube, Spotify, and on our website, we actually have some recordings, some meditation recordings that you may all utilize. The last thing about meditation is understanding that intentionality is everything, right? So while we're walking, intentionally walk. While we're drinking our morning coffee, intentionally drink the morning coffee. Being able to live in the present and be actively engaged with what you're doing at the current moment is probably more difficult to do than you may realize. We live in a society that very much values multitasking, doing a lot of things at once, and that causes us to be a little bit disengaged from what we're doing and what we're carrying out. So next time you're eating, or maybe you're studying, whatever you may be doing, take a second to really stop and intentionally do whatever that activity may be. Think about doing the activity as you do it. All right, the last tool that we're going to talk about is gratitude. So gratitude can mean something different for everybody. The definition that we have here is gratitude is the mental tool we use to remind ourselves of the good stuff. It's a lens that helps us see the things that don't make it onto our list of problems to be solved. It's a spotlight that we shine on the people who give us the good things in life. I know personally, this is something that I struggle with. I get caught up in the doomsday scrolling, I think they call it, where I'm just taking in a lot of negative information and it's very overwhelming. So gratitude is a really nice way to balance that and counteract some of that stress and anxiety by recognizing the good, recognize the positives, right? The bad doesn't take away from the good doesn't take away from the bad, but just allow those two things to coexist. Some benefits of gratitude: higher life satisfaction, reduced effects of stress, improved relationships with others. That is a really big one, by being grateful and showing gratitude to those that we love, and then improved physical health as well. So when we think about putting gratitude into practice, one thing that is kind of the simplest way to start this is at the end of each day, write down 3 good things from the day. Personally, I call my gratitude list my got to do list. So I write down some things that I got to do, something that I'm grateful I got to achieve that day. So notice how you're feeling as you remember each one. What emotions do those bring up? How did you feel in the situation? How do you feel now about it? And again, all of these tools are going to take time to get used to, and even after 2-3 weeks you may not like it, but I do urge you guys to give it a few weeks, to give it a chance. All right, so we are gonna go forward a little bit with the goal setting activity as we're running a little low on time. So many of you may be aware of a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. These are the kind of areas that we want to look at when we're setting a goal, right? So say I want to work out more during the week, right? That's a very vague goal. I just want to work out more. I can make it specific, right? I want to work out 3 days a week for 45 minutes. Measurable. I'm going to keep track of my workouts using my workout journal. Attainable. I'm already doing 2 times a week, so bumping it up to 3 times a week shouldn't be too challenging, right? Relevant. This is something that's relevant within my life because my physical health is important to me and it's something that I really want to focus on right now. And time bound. I'm going to check in with this goal in about 4 weeks to see how it's going, maybe progress, regress, whatever I need to do in that instance. So real quick, I want to ask some of these questions and you can answer in the chat. But what is one thing you learned from this presentation that you'd like to incorporate into your life? You can mention one of these tools that we discussed, maybe what time of day you'd like to do it, how often, how will you remind yourself, and who will keep you accountable, whether that's a friend, family member, maybe peer, mentor, whoever it may be. So I'd love to hear from just a couple of you guys, something you learned, something you found insightful, whatever it may be. The idea of thriving and not just surviving. Yeah, that's a big one. Just getting by to really living a full life. Alrighty, feel free to keep dropping stuff in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alyssa. Here is some contact information specifically for the Wellness Center at Ohio State. And Roger and I can also drop our work emails in the chat as well for you guys.
I will first provide an introduction for Alyssa here. So Dr. Alyssa Erb is a friendly and considerate OBGYN who completed a fellowship in breast surgery. She is currently associated with the Cohen Medical Practice Gynecology in New York, New York. Patients see her for a wide spectrum of conditions such as vaginal diseases, abnormal bleeding, infertility, uterine fibroids, and hormonal imbalance. She also conducts early pregnancy evaluation and birth control consultations, fertility counseling, and performs gynecological surgery. With years of experience in the field, Dr. Alyssa Erb makes sure to help patients feel comfortable while discussing their issues with her. So go ahead and take it away now, Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. So kind of going along with what was talked about before and what are the next steps that we can do, especially with what has been happening in the world and in the news lately. Really, our mental health, I think, is one of the most important things that we can be focusing on. So talking to somebody, whether that's a friend, a family member, a therapist, your primary care physician, just really making sure that you're taking care of yourself and that even though it can be hard to do sometimes, to really put yourself first when it comes to your mental health, because with everything that's going on, and I know that things can get busy and life can get busy and the world can get busy, but taking care of yourself is really, really important. So taking care of your mental health is incredibly important, but also taking care of your physical health is something that's really important and obviously personal to me as a physician. So what can we do, or what's recommended that we do? Really what's important is kind of prevention. So we don't want to wait and go see somebody after things get rough, kind of like was being talked about in the earlier slides when it comes to your mental and physical health, but really trying to get on top of things. So just seeing a primary care physician, starting in your early 20s, seeing somebody every year, then they can monitor for diseases and try and treat things before they can come up. talking about your family history. And so knowing and understanding what your family history is of various health disorders can be really important. So that way you can be tested appropriately for things. And then as far as what specialists should we see? So as a GYN, we recommend that anybody that has a cervix should start getting pap smears at 21 years old and then see their women's healthcare provider every year. What's another thing that's really important is starting at 40 years old, that women should start getting yearly mammograms. That's recommended because we do know that 1 in 8 women in this country are diagnosed with breast cancer any year, which is about 12% of women. So it's not a small number. And about 10% of newly diagnosed breast cancer cases now are happening in women that are under the age of 45. And especially if you have a family history of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, it's really important to follow up and to be checking on these things. There are also some other new recommendations for screenings for things like colon cancer, which you've probably seen a lot of commercials for now, for various types of testing and screening that can be done. Most of the time we talk about doing a colonoscopy, and the recommendation now is starting at 45 years old, and you only have to do them every 10 years as long as everything is normal. Again, if you have a family history or you have certain types of medical conditions, you might need to start earlier, but this is definitely something to, again, discuss with your primary care provider. And then really just being comfortable and never being worried to reach out to a physician if you have any sort of questions about anything. There are no such thing as dumb questions when it comes to seeing your doctor. And it's really important that, again, that you just really take care of yourself, both mentally and physically. Any questions about any of that?
I have done all of this, the mammogram and the colonoscopy. In 10 years, he told me, the doctor. But my problem is right now my leg. I don't want to stay home at this age forever, but it is very hard, just when we talk about, people are different from, us. We are even, the twin brothers have, just different way of thinking.
Yeah, this is true. And I see somebody put in the chat that doctors have so little time these days, and so worrying about overwhelming them. Yeah, I mean, we are busy, obviously, but that's also what we're here to do. We're here to help you. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to take time and really take care of you and make sure that you're doing well. So I would say never be worried about overwhelming your doctor or not asking questions because you don't want to seem like a nuisance or take their time. It's what we're here to do, and we're happy to be able to do it.
Anyway, this world will be, good for everyone if everybody, just get working on, like the meaning of love for me has very deep meaning, meaningful life, peaceful life. And, just sometimes it is hard. It doesn't happen the way I'm thinking, but I mean, this is a time for judgment, and everyone has to judge himself or herself, how we are. it is painful. One is seeking peaceful life, the other one thinking other way. The meaning of love is very few people understand in the world.
Yeah, I think we're going to open it up to questions to all of our presenters. We have maybe just a couple of minutes. So are there, I know we've had a lot of questions in the chat. Are there any other questions for any of our presenters?
I can ask a couple questions. Yeah, so I was just thinking about kind of balancing your own jobs versus your own personal lives, and how much of what you do in your day-to-day kind of falls over into your, you know, your social calendars or your family relationships and things like that. And if you have any advice for us on how to kind of, you know, like use your tips and tricks, but also use our own jobs to kind of, you know, set boundaries, but also kind of, you know, use what we learn every day.
Do you want to take it, Rachel, or would you like me to dive
Oh,
in?
go ahead and jump in if you like.
So, I mean, you already kind of stole the first part of this answer, Lily, the idea of like being able to set clear boundaries. If you don't have the conversation with yourself first, identifying what these boundaries are, you're really just kind of reaching into the dark and guessing what they are. So have the conversation with yourself first, identify the boundaries. That way we can know what we are leaving at work, what we are leaving at home, and try and identify where that line is drawn kind of in the sand. Because until you do that, again, you don't really know for sure. I will also acknowledge something, like as a professional working in this field, I feel like sometimes I hit a switch whenever I leave the office, and I leave all of my brain and all of my practical knowledge and all the good advice that I give people at my desk at the office. And then I go home and I stumble around with relationships and conversations and time management. And then I go back to work and I hit the switch again, and things are going fine and dandy. So I shared that story just to remind us all to like give ourselves grace. Because regardless of the work that we are doing, helping others in a clinical setting, in an academic setting like myself and Rachel here, we have the skills, yes, but it takes us just as much time to learn how to practice them and put them into actual processes and practices. Rachel, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, one thing that's been helpful for me is like, because of work and everything I have going on, I very often forget to do any of the hobbies that I love to do. And so unless I intentionally set, okay, this day I'm gonna go do this at this time, unless I have that built into my calendar, and it's not necessarily like time blocking, you have to color it all out and put it in Google Calendar, but just being aware, like, okay, on this day, I plan to go play my keyboard for 30 minutes, right? And it doesn't have to be these large chunks at a time. So also managing those expectations of how long you're going to be spending on your own personal time and doing your hobbies and focusing on your wellness. I feel like a lot of times we think we have to spend hours upon hours, 15 minutes here, 5 minutes there. All of those really build up. Even if, I don't know if I can say this, but even if you're at work and you need to take 5 minutes to meditate, or you need to just take a little break, go on a wellness walk, if that's something that you can integrate into your work schedule as well, absolutely go for it. Those 5 minutes can really change the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone else have any questions?
What is like when you have a job and in your job, if there is no healthy relationship with the coworker, one thing good, the other thing bad, just bothering you, and how can you deal with that kind of issues?
Were you asking somebody specific?
Just any one of you can. I don't know. I'm just asking from.
Could
Yeah.
you? Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry, it sounds like dealing with some interpersonal issues with coworkers, maybe building up relationships that may not be established, or am I on the right track there of what you're asking?
Yes,
Okay.
it is like, I mean, everywhere we go, when we have healthy relationship, our production will be, we can produce better if we work together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if it doesn't happen the way you think, theory and practice is different things. Practice is very hard than
Yeah.
it is when you couldn't find, just the the way you think. What, how can you deal with that? But that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If
So
you understand my English, I'm sorry about my English is broken.
no, you're okay. You're totally fine. So yeah, we see, you mentioned working as a team, often see better efficiency and productivity. And, in wellness coaching specifically, a lot of the students that we have coming to us, one of their main concerns is social engagement and making friends and getting along with coworkers and building these relationships. Because of COVID, we had kind of like a 2-year hiatus of meeting people and understanding how to form new relationships. I know I still feel like a baby bird when I'm trying to talk to someone new, and I feel like I just word vomit. And so also, again, I know we've said this probably 4 times, but giving yourself grace, right? Just taking one step at a time, right? So in one day, we're not going to form this awesome, great, close relationship with a coworker or with a new person, but just taking that first step, just saying hi, just introducing yourself, just finding some common ground that you can work on as a foundation that then later conversations can grow and develop from there. So just take one step, just say hello, just introduce yourself. That's been the best way that I've been able to kind of jump back into social settings. It's just one step at a time.
Thanks, Rachel. So we're pretty much out of time. So I just wanted to thank everyone today. Definitely Jacqueline and Lily, who are both on our wellness committee and participated and got this presentation going. And then also our presenters, Rachel and Roger and Alyssa. Thank you so much. I had some questions in the chat. I will have the recordings ready. There are a couple of people who would like them emailed to them. I will do that. And it sounds like Roger and Rachel will be able to share their slides. So I'll make sure that those are available too. But thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. So I hope everyone has a wonderful Memorial Day weekend and, stay well, stay healthy.